Few characters in Helluva Boss have captivated fans quite like Stolas, the insecure prince who's trapped in the expectations of society and forced into a position of weakness with the most recent episode, Mastermind. From his flirtatious and interesting interactions with Blitz, to his heartbreaking moments of vulnerability, Stolas is one of the most complex and intriguing characters in the show, which is why I personally wanted to do a deep dive into his character. The way he's written is intricate and convoluted, so to make this video easier to follow, I'll be splitting up this video into 5 main chapters as to what I think makes Stolas such an impressive character within the franchise. I'll be covering his main personality traits, his motivations, his relationships, his background, and his role in the story. This took a lot of research and time, so if you enjoy this video and want to support me on my channel, you can subscribe and comment down below who you want to see a deep dive on next. I'm going to start with his surface personality. This is a side to Stolas that most people in the Helluva Boss universe see. The side that showcases his more regal upbringing. He's got this air of sophistication around him. He's well-spoken, elegant, and as proven by his past in the episode The Circus, he's highly educated too. But of course there's more to Stolas than his royal past. He's also playful and flirtatious, as seen of his interactions with Blitz. He has this almost theatrical side and clearly doesn't take himself too seriously, especially in regards to his over-the-top flirting and evidently sexual nature. But if you search a little deeper into Stolas, you'll also find that he's also quite emotionally vulnerable. He's got a strange loneliness that doesn't quite get fulfilled. He doesn't quite fit in with the Regals, often rebelling quietly against the traditional norms. But he also doesn't quite fit in with the lower class, since he doesn't really understand their struggles and the day-to-day life that the imps and hellhounds of hell have to survive. Stolas often feels like he isn't enough and longs for an emotional connection. It's this that makes him relatable to us as an audience. Many of us struggle with genuinely connecting with others nowadays because although there are millions of people at our fingertips, not many of them are genuine. This falls into my final trait of Stolas, and it's his weird self-centered nature. Now I know what you're thinking. Stolas isn't selfish, but hear me out, that's not what I said. Stolas is kind, genuinely good-hearted, but he lives in his own little bubble, and for better or for worse, it makes it harder for him to hear others and understand what's going on with people. For example, he didn't really notice Octavia's upset in Lululand, or Blitz in the episode Full Moon. He always continues with his plans because he has a set motion of how they go because he's inherently self-centered, and it's important to address that. I think that's part of what makes him such a good character. From my own research, I've devised that Stolas has 3 main motives, the first and his utmost prioritized motive being his daughter, Octavia. He's a dedicated father, and the show has commented on this time and time again. His love for Octavia is one of the purest aspects of his character, and part of what makes him so loved by the fandom. Despite all his flaws and mistakes, he genuinely wants to be a good dad and makes sure that she's happy and looked after. His second motive is his desire for personal fulfillment and dedication in working towards a committed and loving relationship. After being stuck in a loveless marriage to Stella, it's clear he strives for something more, which is where his relationship with Blitz comes in, but we'll talk about that a little later on. At his core, he pushes for a connection that feels real, and that's something a lot of us can connect with. Of course, his final motive is his status, which, as of Season 2 Episode 10, is a little rocky and a lot more broken down, but he grew up with royal expectations and standards. He has the qualities of a Goetian prince, and proven by his upkeep of his traditions and rules, like the Harvest Moon Festival, he clearly cares for his position in his life, and although his responsibilities took a backseat to his personal struggles, he still focuses a lot on the expectations of him and worries about other Regals' opinions. What we find out about Stolas as an audience is mostly for relationships. They're at the heart of Stolas' story, and as you can expect from someone in Stolas' position, his relationships are mostly messy and complicated. But we won't just be focusing on his romantic relations, we'll be taking a peek into his familiar ties and his platonic relationships as well. We'll start with Stella, who's introduced second to Blitz during the show. She's hostile, toxic, and actively wants Stolas dead to the point she's hired assassins against him. They started off as an arranged marriage so that they could produce an heir, but it proved to be an absolute disaster considering her venomous nature. After a hookup with Blitz, Stolas was given the push of confidence he needed to divorce Stella, and despite being in separate scenes, it's obvious the breakup was messy and destructive for both of them in their own different ways. For me, Stella also represents these rigid expectations of Hell's nobility, and their conflict and separation shows Stolas' rebellion against those pressures of society, which is part of the reason I find their relationship so interesting, and thought it worth mentioning. Next, I'll move on to what you were all waiting for, Blitz. His relationship with Blitz is complicated and entirely frustrating for the audience. The relationship started completely as a transactional agreement, but as we see further and further into the show, it's clear that Stolas has a genuine affection for Blitz and deeply cares for him. To us as an audience, it's now clear that Blitz also cares deeply for Stolas too, but Stolas, he's completely unaware of it. He's also unaware of the societal differences between the two. Although he was aware of the power dynamic between them thanks to the agreement, He fails to see how the way he handled the conversation with Blitz in an insensitive manner was bad. I'll leave a pretty good video in the description that depicts this a lot better than I can, but the fact is, Blitz is an imp who had a hard life, who worked hard to make a living. Of course his emotions were going to be heightened when Stolas took the book away, and instead of instantly explaining when Blitz began to beg and ask what he did wrong, he continued to demand for the book. Stolas, intentionally or not, only cared about how he felt and what he'd say, and didn't consider giving Blitz a moment to process all of this. I think it's important to comment on this because this is one of Stolas' flaws. He is inherently self-centered whether he means to be or not, and I wouldn't say this makes him a bad character. In fact, it makes him interesting and relatable to some, and it makes sense for someone of his status to not really read the room outside of his own little bubble. I'm looking forward to see what comes next regarding their relationship considering this little scene in Mastermind, and whatever the case, I'm sure it'll be entertaining, and there'll be more to say of that in a future video because Stolas still clearly cares for Blitz, or he wouldn't have risked his life for him. His relationship with Octavia is also something I wanted to talk on because, to me, it's quite interesting. He both babies her and neglects her at the same time, but you can still tell he deeply loves his daughter. I think due to her age and his that he fails to understand the right moments to be a father, but in multiple instances he's seen to neglect his daughter's emotional well-being, which can be hard when you're a Rego with many issues going on. It makes it feel more real that Stolas isn't always completely there for his daughter, and I'm excited to see what will come of this relationship now that he's been banished, and from the peeks we got from the trailer, I think it's gonna be an intense episode. I think his relationship with Octavia not only showcases his little bubble that he has going on, but also showcases his emotional growth. He learns and he has that willingness to communicate with people when he knows he's in the wrong, and I think that's important for his character. Then there's Asmodeus. His relationship with Asmodeus interests me a little since they're both higher up in the social class. I thought it was worth to mention the way they interact. Since both also are rebelling against the traditional norms and courting imps, I think it's important to mention the way they talk and show respect to each other. We know this especially in the episode where Fizz and Blitz get ransomed and the meeting they have together. Stolas, at his core, doesn't think imps and Regals dating is wrong, yet he still disrespects imps, which confuses me. He's done it a lot less in the more recent episodes, which shows growth, but there have been multiple instances of him hurting, disregarding, and neglecting his servants, which is strange considering the relationship he has with an imp. Stolas' role in the story is fairly important as of Season 2 onwards. Throughout Season 1, he was merely a stepping stone for the main cast to carry out their duties and make some money with their assassination company, but as of Season 2, Stolas seems to be the driving force for Blitz and motivates the imp to grow and develop as a person, but also to heal from past trauma. His role is a lot more involved, and with the latest episode, I'm sure he's now the main focus of the show, especially considering everything that happened. Whether he's delivering laugh-out-loud moments or tugging at our heartstrings, Stolas' character as a whole explores themes like love, duty, and defiance of societal expectations, and showcases neglect and loneliness in a way that makes the audience think a little further. I think what makes Stolas so relatable and likable as a character is that he's not just a prince, he's flawed, and that inherently makes him human to us as an audience. We can relate to his actions, getting flustered by a crush, getting embarrassed by standards, and wanting to look after our family and loved ones. It's a reminder to us to break free from our own bubbles once in a while and check on our loved ones. Lastly, let's talk about where Stolas comes from. As a member of the Goetian family, he was born into a life of privilege, but also crushing obligation. His arranged marriage to Stella was never about love, it was about creating the perfect precautionary heir. Despite these constraints, Stolas has carved out spaces of joy in his life, especially for his relationship with Octavia, but his desire to break free from tradition, whether through his affair with Blitz or his growing defiance of Stella, shows a longing for individuality and true fulfillment. So what do we know? Stolas is a multifaceted character whose blend of humor, heartbreak, and complexity makes him a standout figure in Helluva Boss. His powerful status, yet emotional vulnerability, makes for an amazing and interesting blend that makes you yearn to see more from him. I've really enjoyed taking a look into his character and seeing what makes him tick, but what do you think about Stolas? Let me know down below, and again, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, and I'll see you all next time with another character analysis.